In progress.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's council meeting, Tuesday, November 4th, 2024. Let's give it up for Election Day. Woo! Wait, we need some more enthusiasm. Come on, it's Election Day.
That's right.
One more time. Let's go. Woo! All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for the warm welcome here. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And then I am going to read aloud the following statement regarding teleconference participation for Councilmember Hoffa. We will have teleconference participation at this meeting from Councilmember Hoffa pursuant to the California Brown Act rules for just cause attendance. Councilmember Hoffa, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end up until now?
I was.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
I do.
Please give us a brief general description of the circumstances relating to your need to appear remotely.
Illness, medical.
Is anyone over the age of 18 with you in the room?
No.
Can everyone clearly hear Councilmember Hoffa?
Yes.
All right, there's a resounding yes there. The Brown Act requires that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting be taken by roll call. And Councilmember Hoffa, we hope you feel better.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll pass it to Clementine for roll call and just share with folks how to participate in public comment.
Councilmember Barber,
Present.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Present.
and Mayor Williamson.
I'm here.
And information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is available on the agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters, you will be muted until it is your turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you're connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In-person attendees, please keep your phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with our meeting. And thank you for participating in your city government.
Thank you, Clementine. With that, we're going to go to Pledge of Allegiance and we'll ask Councilmember Garcia to kick us off here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. With that, we're going to start with our presentation. And first is to recognize November 2024 as Native American Heritage Month. And then I have a proclamation that we are issuing. So I'll go ahead and share this with you all, which I think it's actually very timely that we're recognizing Native American Heritage Month today on Election Day, and just what that means historically for our country. So whereas the initial efforts to have a day of recognition for Native Americans were first approved in 1915 by the Annual Congress of the American Indian Association as directed by its president, Reverend Sherman Coolidge, an Aparo minister. And whereas in 1976, members of the Cherokee Nation, J.C. Elliott High Eagle, authored the first legislation to proclaim a Native American Awareness Week, and the resolution was later signed by President Gerald Ford. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush designated November as National American Indian Heritage Month after approving a joint resolution. And whereas the month of November is designated as a time to learn about the original inhabitants of the land that is now the United States of America, from the rich traditions to the languages spoken to the history of persecution and forced removal, the entire story of the indigenous peoples of America should be learned and reckoned with. And whereas the culture and history of the Native people of all 50 states weave an undeniable thread in the tapestry that is the United States, and their stories continue to be an important part of the continued story of this country. And whereas the Esselen and Rumslen, Oholen, Costanoan Native nations live and have lived in Monterey for generations, the members of these nations work to honor their past and continue to share their culture with the Monterey community through events in connection with the seasons, through artwork and keeps time-honored traditions and practices alive, through storytelling to keep language and families intact, and through the constant reminder that they are active members of the Monterey community. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Tyler Williamson, Mayor of the City of Monterey, on behalf of the City Council and citizens, hereby proclaim the month of November 2024 as Native American Heritage Month. So let's give a round of applause for that. We have a lot to celebrate today. I will open it up to the council if you have any comments or questions.
No, I just concur with the reading of that, and our historical significance in Monterey for many years has been based on those that lived here before the explorers discovered this place. So honor to them that we still recognize the First Nation, the indigenous people of Monterey County. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Anybody else? Okay, and with that, we'll open up for public comment. Just to remind folks, what we do is we identify folks that want to speak on each item at the beginning of the public comment period. So for those that are in the chamber, I would ask you to either stand to the left of the podium or identify yourself by raising your hand. And while we're doing that, I'll check on Zoom. For folks on Zoom, if you can use the raise hand function, and I'll do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this is on the proclamation. And this is not on the, just not general public comment. This is specifically to the proclamation that was just presented. So we have one. Is there anybody else that I don't see? I just have the one speaker at the mic. All right. Do we have anybody online? We have 2 online. All right. So Mr. Rowley. All right. Go ahead and go online. Mr. Rowley has decided not to speak on this one.
First, I'm calling on a telephone caller with the last 3 digits, 705. You can go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I'd like to remind everyone that these proclamations are nice, but they really aren't meaningful. The real meaning is if the United States would give back the Lakota Indians their tribal lands. And they just rode on their horses to Washington, D.C. to ask for that, and they were refused once again. So, this all puff talk, unfortunately, doesn't get the job done. I'd like you to have a resolution that the Monterey City Council supports that the United States gives back the Lakota their rightful tribal lands. Thank you.
And the next speaker is a telephone caller with the last 3 digits, 902.
Good afternoon. This is Nina Beatty. I'm very thankful that you're doing this, having this resolution today. It's a very, very important thing to open up the conversation. Justice, land back to Native tribes, local Native tribes is extremely important. There are some local events happening this weekend at San Jose State University. November 9th and 10th, beginning at 12 noon, there will be events, and I understand there will be local tribal members there participating in the festivities. Also, this weekend on the 9th, the Amamutsin Lecture Series at UCSC at the Merrill Cultural Center will be an update on stopping the gravel mine near Gilroy, which is on their ancestral land. And the news has been recent efforts to restore land back to Native people here. And that's in just the beginning stages. Much more needs to be done. And I recommend heartily the book Cross of Thorns by journalist Elias Castillo on the history of Sarah and the local missions here in Monterey and Carmel. It's necessary reading for everyone to understand what happened here in Monterey, as well as the rest of the history as far as the actual genocide that took place in Monterey County, so that we can learn from this past and never ever repeat it, as well as bringing justice to the people that have kept on going and maintained their traditions and renewed their language and are amazing people in our community. I'm so very thankful for them. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close public comments on that. Thank you for that. It's helpful to have some context in regards to things that are happening locally. So I appreciate you sharing those events. And thank you, the council, for considering and the public for considering the proclamation. All right, and with that, we will go on to general public comments. And I will share, I want to make sure that we get through the agenda tonight, and we are going to end the council meeting today at 6 p.m. So if we need to, we'll adjust some of the public comment times to ensure that we can get through So I'll go ahead and open it up. If anybody wishes to speak on general public comments for items that are not on today's agenda, if you can go ahead and identify yourself if you're in the chamber. Yeah, and if you want to stay seated, you can, and just raise your hand. If you are able, if you can stand up to the left of the podium. And that way we can just get a better sense of who's wanting to speak on this item. And then in the meantime, I will check online for folks to use the raise hand function via Zoom and do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 4 online. Is there anybody that's seating that I'm maybe missing that has their hand up? Okay, so everybody's standing if I got that correct. Okay, so we have, so we're gonna go ahead and go to 2 minutes for the general public comment, and we'll go ahead and start in the chamber. Mr. Raleigh.
Yes, good afternoon. Tom Raleigh, I'm here because Rick Hoyer is out of town for a time, and we felt that it would be important to comment on the activities of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, which quite frankly is a bureaucracy out of control. I gave you a copy of a commentary that is submitted to the Pine Cone as a follow-up to their article that was a week ago Friday on Judge Carrie Panetta's decision to sunset the water supply charge, Ordinance 152, which was determined to be collected illegally. Right now, they're trying to figure out how to return these ill-gotten gains, which was double dipping, quite frankly, and they can claim it's not double dipping, but it was double dipping because they got the surcharge restored some time ago, about 10 years ago, on our Cal-Am water bills. So the thing that I'd like to mention is that the public trust was violated. 15,000 people turned in petitions to put that water ordinance to a vote. And because some of the petitions where the signatures weren't correct or whatever, I believe it was over 12,000. This was ignored by the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District in 2012. So they collected, we made MPTA, requested them to sunset as required by their ordinance, and they didn't do it. And we had to wind up seeking litigation, Judge Carrie Panetta's Superior Court, upheld by the district court. This water board cannot be trusted to follow its own ordinances. So when you hear any comments or any recommendations from this water board, you need to hold that behind and think about it. Thank you.
Can I get 3 minutes?
Hi, Steve Lightfoot here to remind you that I will be moving out of California to Utah, probably permanently, if you don't demonstrate with me throughout this John Lennon murder evidence I have found against our government. LennonMurderTruth.com and all the glory attached to it will slip through your fingers after March 1st, 2025. Every Sunday and this December 8th, I am in downtown Monterey on Alvarado Street from noon to whatever with my peach pink website band. Get off your asses, masses. Get off your asses and care while you can. I'm daring you to give a damn. You have been flat-footed fools and ingrates all this time regarding me and what I am doing. This story is too big to break any other way than by our forcing the media to disclose it. Force. Your cowardly cover-up is harming America every day you keep quiet. Your apathy is also messenger abuse. My life is in danger as if you all didn't know. This is what I can do about your resolute foolishness, bootlicking jealousy, and apathy regarding the matter. If you lose me, you lose historically and in ways you can't fathom now. Many millions in taxes for sure, a huge loss to California's reputation and standing in the world. The biggest news event in U.S. history. You have not only been taking me for granted these past several years, you have all secretly conspired here to boycott my magazine behind my back while the rest of America got informed instead. That you are secretly and jealously against what I stand for, protecting King. After I do succeed in exposing all this, you won't be able to argue to your fellow Americans you didn't know. No, you had my website advertised in your faces for years, and the website speaks for itself. The killer's face, true identity, Chapman's name and letter, linking Reagan before the crime. Government bold print codes and major magazines all about it, including passages in Nixon's book, The Real War, that detail why Lennon must be assassinated, as it sits next to just elected Reagan the day of the murder. Who's in, who's out, the headline, and what King writes about. Truth, not theory. I have more, but I'm not being given my right to speak.
Thank you for your time, Mayor Williamson and council members. I'm Peter Barrage. I'm the Communications and Outreach Chair for the Monterey Off-Road Cycling Association. I'm just one person standing before you, but the city's own survey show that the overwhelming majority of our community wants to see a bike park and dedicated bike trails in the old Capitol site plan. Many of those people will be before you when this item is on your agenda. All told, nearly 800 people weighed in, significantly more than most city surveys. That's not surprising, considering bikes are prohibited on every dirt road and trail within city limits. Not to mention, the same survey showed that next to walking and hiking, biking is the most popular activity among your constituents. By this rationale, it would seem like a foregone conclusion. The city should adopt an old Capitol site master plan that starts with bikes. But to date, the plan makes bikes an afterthought and positions them as a conduit to obstacles rather than a conduit to the many opportunities cycling represents. Why, in a city where walkers and hikers have unrestricted access to trails and nature and bikers have zero access, why would the city spend $1 on more hiking trails before using that dollar to create dedicated trails for bikes? And why would the city disregard the very public input it sought? The bike community has pledged assistance with planning, funding, building, and maintenance. Our bike community has also highlighted the many benefits mountain bike trails would bring. Why wouldn't City Council demand a master plan that puts bikes first? Are we really going to let concerns about lack of parking stand in the way of this opportunity? To me, that sounds like you're saying the bike park would be too popular, so we can't build it. There are numerous and reasonable solutions to parking concerns and to all other perceived obstacles. If the city refuses to put bikes first in the old Capitol site plan, it will be a historic missed opportunity for our residents, businesses, families, visitors, and our natural environment. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Chantel Melendrez, and I believe Mayor Williamson and Mr. Garcia, you spoke to my son at 411 Garden Avenue. We live behind him at 413 Garden Avenue. He talked to you, you were, I think, kind of doing the neighborhood thing, and he happened to be in the front yard and he talked to you about the alley that is off Garden Avenue that goes to Estrella. And it's a T-shaped alley. And I've met Mr. Hardy there. I actually started this whole process with this alley 12 years ago with Jeff Krebs. And nothing happened till about 2 weeks ago. The tractor thing came and kind of cleaned out the weeds. I would say that's a really, really small start. I would ask that you either take care of the alley the way you do with the other alleys in the neighborhood via Del Monte or sell it to us. That's been my request for 12 years. I spoke with Mr. Hardy. He came, he met us. Oh, does that mean it's, oh, one more? Okay. June a year ago. So it's been about almost a year and a half. And he measured things. He walked around, had all these promises and stuff, never got an email back. It's been a year and a half. I've been to the office. I've sent emails. My son has sent emails. We're really frustrated over this. So if it's a hassle and you don't want to deal with it, just sell it to us. We'll take care of it, maintain it. It needs, we've got big, huge water puddles that form from the weather. It needs to be graded. It needs a drain. It needs a lot of stuff. So there's also actually a fire lane that goes behind there. And I don't live by there, so it's not quite my problem, except I do like when fire trucks have access to our property. So thank you.
Would you mind connecting with city staff on the side and make sure we can get you a follow-up on that?
Shall I go ahead? Good evening.
Oh,
Yes.
I apologize. I wasn't, thank you. I wasn't paying.
I mean,
Did we not capture you before the cutoff time? I think we might have missed you, unfortunately.
So you're saying I can't make.
Yes,
Okay.
unfortunately, we had folks identify themselves at the beginning of the public comment period. And so if you didn't identify yourself at the beginning of that we can't take your public comment. But if you want, you can submit those to the council and we can read those, or you can provide them at the next council meeting.
The proclamation.
The proclamation was already given, unfortunately. Sorry that we missed you, Karen. Okay, let's jump to the folks online. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Calling on Ms. Moffett.
Yes, yes, Lorna Moffett here. Senator Laird professes to be an aggressive activist towards climate change, but he allocated $1 million+ to eliminate thousands of eucalyptus trees in our county. I'm appealing to you to spare as many eucalyptus trees for the following reasons. At Angel Island, where thousands of eucalyptus trees grew, there was no fires. I repeat, there was no fires. However, the Native Plant Society came in and insisted they were a fire hazard, and as non-natives and fire hazards, they had to be removed. The Hills Conservation Network reported the California Department of Parks and Recreation tried to restore Angel Island to its native flora and reduce fire danger by cutting down thousands of eucalyptus trees. But the project became an unintended demonstration of how forests suppress wildfire. 8 years after the removal of the eucalyptus forest, the first wildfire occurred, burning 1.5 acres. Many years later, the largest fire swept through the brush grasses and the oak trees and consumed over half of the island, and they could not put it out. But when they came to the 6 acres of eucalyptus trees left standing around the buildings, those buildings survived the fire because of their wind and fire break abilities and transpiration of fog drips from their leaves. And no one seems to want to learn that lesson. Recently, a judge ruled that the U.S. Forest Service could not thin the forest because the facts are now revealing that thinning the forest actually causes wildfires. Recently, Senator Laird
Thank you. Next speaker is Tom Reeves.
Thank you. I have to start with an apology. I've been retired long enough that I don't remember the procedures. With regard to item 14, I understand through hearsay that that's going to be tabled. And if so, I would like to comment on it though. So I can do that now or wait until you get to the consent agenda.
Now is not the appropriate time to make comments.
Okay, well, just to let you know, I'd like to comment on it. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Next speaker is Ms. Beatty.
This is Nina Beatty. I want to talk about wind and the fire danger that the city is creating in the forest. Do you know about Santa Ana winds, the powerful winds in arid Southern California? Not only is the city here destroying nature, bulldozing the hell out of everything, killing the birds, the reptiles, the insects, the trees and bushes, and destroying their homes and food sources, the city and its contractors are causing increased fire danger through wind. Trees and vegetation are windbreaks, natural wind blocking, mitigation, slowing, and absorbing mechanisms. The stillness of a forest is due to that. But the city is cutting trees down, thinning, eliminating their lower branches, limbing, and stripping vegetation. This creates tunnels and open spaces where none existed before. Try to start a campfire where there's no open space. You can't. But open it up to the air and bingo, a roaring campfire. That's what you've done. Winds can now whistle up and down hillsides and canyons with greater and greater ease as you continue clearing, and accelerate and strengthen via the Venturi effect. Winds can then carry embers from lower fires, fan existing fires, and aid in the fire start. Instead of the Jack's Peak fire recently, where a car had hit a utility pole that could never get going due to the mounds of pine needles in the vegetation that kept the fire just smothering. Lush full forests protect from fire. You're creating more and stronger winds. Plus, limbing takes away the branches which trees rely on for balance, and thinning destroys the interlocking community of roots. The nursery told me that pines, due to poor root depth, rely on interlocking roots of the close forest to stay upright, but you're destroying that. Trees are more vulnerable to falling over onto electrical lines, roads, and buildings, creating more fire danger. In addition, there's the cataclysmic deaths and destructions of wildlife. Rains will also erode those bare hillsides, washing away topsoil, causing mudslides, sedimentation into creeks and rivers, salmon and trout habitat, impact water quality as well. Fire mitigation is anti-nature.
And our last speaker is Johnny Camus.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Johnny Camus. I am a board member of the Parkland Monterey HOA, and we are here to comment on item number 6, which is the acceptance of the California Coastal Commission's monies to do studies for sea level rise.
Real quick. So are you wanting item number 6 to be pulled? It's on the consent. And so the general public comment isn't the time to do that, but we can pull the item if you want, or you can speak about it during the general public comment opportunity for the consent items.
Okay, I'll speak on that item specifically during consent. I don't need it pulled, but I just would like to comment on it if possible.
And I apologize about that. Just procedurally want to make sure that we get this right. So we'll make sure you raise your hand again when we get back to the consent public comment period.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, and with that, we will now close general public comment and move to the consent agenda. We are looking at pulling item 14 and 16. Anybody on the council wish to pull anything else?
Yes, one statement if I could, comment on item number 16.
So since we're pulling it, why don't we hold comments until we get to that item?
You bet.
Okay, so that way we just kind of stay clean here.
Yep.
Anything else wish to be pulled? Councilmember Hoffa, anything? Okay, let's take it out for general public comment on the consent items for items other than 14 and 16, which are the 2 items associated with the NCIP program. So anybody in the chamber wish to speak on general public, on the consent agenda items? You wish to pull 6, or do you want to just you just want to make a comment? Okay, anybody else wish to speak on the consent agenda? All right, let's check online. I'll give folks a countdown to use the raise hand function via Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 2 folks online, so we'll go ahead and start in the chamber.
Good afternoon again, Tom Raleigh. I just want to follow up on the fact that Kim Cole's been following this issue for a long time and the sea level rise. And you recently this spring had comment on your sewer bill in which you used data, which was obviously phony data to approve your sewer bill increases. And one of the things was the study that was approved in 2021. I think it was February 2021, done by Kimley Horn, was an exhaustive study. And it had some options in which you needed to make some choices like a year ago. You never discussed it. You never followed up. I don't know if it was the city manager's bailiwick or the mayor's managed bailiwick, but there were decisions that need to be made because we're facing to save Del Monte Avenue. There's a timetable and you missed it. So I'm hoping that this follow-on study and looking at realistic data on sea level rise will be of value and you can make the necessary decisions. Because I see a breakwater or some kind of solution at being a solution that's going to be with a big B. And it's going to be way beyond the city's capacity. And the sooner we get moving on it, the better. And I'm really encouraged by seeing this follow-on study. So thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go to the public commenters online.
Mr. Camus can go ahead at this point.
Yes, again, my name is Johnny Camus. I am a board member of the Parkland Monterey Homeowners Association with 60 homes. I wanted to comment on the item number 6. We appreciate you accepting the monies. and doing the study on sea level rise. We, however, would love for you to focus on preserving our beaches, preserving our roads, our sewer system, as was just discussed, preserving our home most of all. We were very unhappy with the direction with the managed retreat, and we were hoping that we could be focused on solutions that will protect our community, our beaches, our parks, and we hope that that money can be used in that respect, and not to manage a retreat. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Ursula.
Yes, hello, Mayor Williamson and council members. My name is Ursula Galascioti. I'm a homeowner in Monterey. I represent the Homeowners Association of Parkland of Monterey, as Johnny Camus, who just spoke as well. We are a 60-unit condominium complex located on La Playa Street, adjacent to Del Monte Beach. We are interested in the City of Monterey's local coastal program. We are in support of the city obtaining the local assistance grant from the California Coastal Commission. The utilization of the funds designated for the preparation of the updated sea level rise, vulnerability assessment, and adaptation plan. We strongly urge the city to pursue an up-to-date scientific and engineering-based approach to sea level rise, and not to rely solely on past studies. Advances in climate science and engineering modeling over the recent years provide new tools and methodologies that can yield far more accurate predictions and innovative adaptation strategies. We have sent a letter to the council explaining our concerns in detail. We are concerned about sea level rise, dune erosion, and the potential loss of Del Monte Beach. We feel that Del Monte Beach is vital to the city of Monterey, to our city residents, and to our visitors. We are opposed to a plan that includes managed retreat. We look forward to the opportunity to work with the city to develop coastal resilience solutions to preserve the Monterey coastline for future generations to enjoy. Thank you very much for your attention and consideration. We look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council for a motion and deliberation on the consent, with the exception of items number 14 and 16.
Move to approve everything but 16.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
and Mayor Williamson.
That's a yes for me. With that, we'll go to consent item 14 to authorize the finance director to appropriate $210,000 from the Neighborhood and Community Improvement Program ending balance account to the El Estero Park Center Playground Equipment Upgrade Project. With that, I'll pass it to Hans.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, staff has looked at the number of projects and is proposing that we are appropriate $210,000 from the Neighborhood and Community Improvement Program ending balance to the El Estero Park project. But we are proposing, since we heard that there were some questions, to continue that item to the next meeting.
Okay, bring it back to the council for any questions. Councilmember Hoffa, did we lose him? I just saw him a second ago. There you are. Did you have any questions, Councilmember Hoffa? Okay, with that, go ahead and open it up for public comment. Anybody in the chamber wish to speak on this item? All right, anybody online? We'll do a countdown for folks to use the raise hand function to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have one speaker. We'll go ahead and go to that speaker.
Go ahead, please, Tom.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. You have my written comments on items 14 and 16, so I won't belabor my comments about item 14 from what I've already written. I just wanted to add that in terms of the process, and that I keep going back to this theme of process, I think the more correct way to approach this is to have this go to the NIP committee for their consideration, since it does have to do with funding. and then let them advise the council before you consider this. So I would ask that this item be tabled and referred to the NIP committee for their input. I brought out in my written comments where I think this does not conform with the policies and procedures manual also. So that's another reason to at least have the NIP committee consider it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. And with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council for motion and deliberation.
If I,
Please.
yeah, if I'm remembering what the city manager said was, he's requesting to be postponed and come back in 2 weeks.
Yep. So, yep. He asked it for us to continue it, but I'm
Yeah,
providing an
well,
opportunity.
maybe 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. So
continuing
it.
date
So
not certain. Is that correct?
yeah, continuing to,
Is a certain date, tabling is not.
Thank you. I get this confused every time.
yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, and it does say actually in my notes here, if I just read my notes, thank you for providing that. November 19th.
Yeah. So that's my point, that I think, one of the callers was, and I think the sufficient time, if we table this, to a date uncertain or the next meeting, there should be sufficient time to be able to make sure everybody knows what is in this motion. So
Is that your motion?
that's my motion, that I concur with the staff's recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Who wants to take it? I'm just kidding. All right. Any other discussion? All right. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Mayor Williamson.
That's a yes for me. With that, we'll go to item number 6, consent item number 16, to receive mayor's and vice mayor's recommendations and appointment recommended applicants to the Appeals Hearing Board, Neighborhood and Community Improvement Program Committee, and Parks and Recreation Commission. With that, I'll pass it to actually, I apologize. Before we do a presentation, Councilmember Smith had approached me in regards to a request. So maybe we can start with that and we can go from there.
Yeah, and it looks like there's going to be some comments from the public, which is, I think, fine. But my request was going to be, and after looking at this, and since the posted was Thursday, then it was updated, and Friday, I've had several members of the public ask for this to be postponed and wait till they could actually weigh in and deliver. So my 3 points is for an ask that we postpone this for 2 weeks, a reasonable time. Tonight of all nights is, a lot of people are preoccupied and admittedly not able to be here and participate. And in open and transparency and community engagement, it just feels like tonight is not the kind of night to be talking about committee selections, interview process, that I think the public has a high interest and high level to. But I've heard from several community members that really wanted to be here, but they cannot be here due to tonight's event. November 5th, the election has taken away a lot of participation, I think. The other thing is on the issue of the technical piece. I did hear from one committee member, we might hear from that person, that there was a technical problem with having a complete interview. So I just think it's being judicious to postpone this and come back within 2 weeks to be able to have this consideration, have a better participation from the those that were considered. Also, an opportunity for one of those interviews to be redone because I think there was a technical problem and wasn't sufficiently able to get through an interview.
Can you more specifically speak to the applicant that had a technical issue?
Yeah, I received a call from Monique Caldy, and I think maybe Dr. Barber could speak to that because she was the one that was doing the interview.
And was that your second or your third point?
I can make a couple more points.
I thought I heard you say 3 and I only heard 2.
Yeah, so I was making the point, it's tonight of all nights. We don't have the participation that I think we should have. The technical reason that there may have been an issue with one of the interviews. But also there was a announcement on Thursday that was posted up, and then we did an amendment to that same agenda item Friday. So the public was a little bit confused because when they saw it and then they were reading that, I got 3 phone calls. And the main thing is I got was we really want to participate, but this is just not a good night to do it. And they would rather it come back so that we can have full disclosure. And then other people might want to make a comment about whether it's an applicant that didn't get selected or whether they're an interested party from either one of the commissions that we have selected and appointed. So I just think there's a high level of engagement, considering that we've had other appointments where the room was full one night. So I think there's a lot of public that are feeling that this is just not a good night.
Dr. Barber, did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to address part of your points. So first of all, I'm really confused because in past years when they've had appointments, because I know I've been part of applications, and when we've had appointments by other mayors and it was just the mayor and it wasn't the mayor and the vice mayor, there's been no complaints. And then only this time during this period, now we're hearing a complaint. And I think even earlier part, the mayor added the vice mayor, which rotates. So it's not the same person all the time. So that it could be more equitable at the request of the public. And so now that we have the second layer, it seems to still be, complaints and issues. And I'm trying to understand where that's coming from, because it's actually a more in-depth process that we're going through with every applicant. And as far as the applicant that had technical difficulties, I think it's no different than when you have an interview or anything else at work. And if you have a technical issue, you see how you can continue to move on alternatively, which I did through chat. And I asked the person, Monique, whether that was fine, if we could go on. I apologize for the technology, but I don't control technology. That happens in meetings every day in our jobs. So we did it. I asked every question. She got a chance to answer every question, just like everybody else. Nothing was different. And so I don't think that would make a big difference in the process, because she still got asked the same questions, still was able to say whatever she needed to say, even through the chat. And I've done those not only with her, but other pieces in my job with interviews that had technical issues. So I don't think that's something that would be an issue in the process.
Okay. Please.
I think I would like to also hear what the public has to say. And I mean, I see a good amount of public here present, and I'm not sure how many are viewing online. So I think there is enough interest, it seems to me, to be able to address this item tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Hoffa, did you want to have a chance to weigh in?
Oops. Yeah, I mean, I would just say there have been issues with this in the past. So I realize Councilmember Barber may not have been around back then, but there have been issues with this in the past. This isn't the first time. I think Councilmember Ed makes a good point about maybe we should wait 2 weeks. I don't think waiting 2 weeks would be a big deal, but also like to hear from the public that are there. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure about the technical issue. It sounds like it wasn't addressed to the council or to the person that interviewed. So I guess I have some concerns in regards to the complaints and how it was submitted. It doesn't seem like when Dr. Barber interviewed Monique that there was any issue in regards to the need to reschedule or address that. So I don't know what delaying that or changing that really does, unless the council generally feels that we should allow reconsideration of that. So I leave that open to the council to decide. And then in general, what I hear as far as a concern is in relation to the Naval Support Activity seat for the NCIP. And so perhaps we can allow the folks that aren't caught up in the concerns associated with that to have their appointments delayed. And so perhaps what I could maybe find some kind of common ground here is to say, let's delay that so we can give more time for community engagement and input, and let's move forward with the other appointments. That's just my sense. So I'm not sure if we can just kind of get a straw poll from the council to kind of get a sense, should we allow staff to move forward with the presentation, or do we want to just make a motion to continue this item. We want to just real quick sense, there's no point of continuing to talk about it if the council's wanting to move forward with it, and then we'll have staff do a presentation, because I'm sure that there's folks in the public that don't really have a full sense of what's going on, and it would be good to get staff a presentation. And if we're not talking about it tonight, we might as well just move on. So we have a tight agenda tonight. So just yes or no, do you want to continue moving forward with continuing it, or?
I want to postpone it.
Okay.
And move forward
Okay.
in a couple weeks. But
Thank you.
but there's in dialogue, I want to respond to Councilmember Barber, because I learned a lot and I had no idea that.
Councilor Smith, if I may ask, I think there's going to be an opportunity if we move forward tonight. I think there'll be an opportunity. I don't want to cut you off. I want you to be able to share your feedback. We're doing this a little bit out of norm. We usually have staff do a presentation. So I just kind of want to get a sense of if we're moving on. Otherwise, you can save it for the next council meeting and it has more context in regards. Please.
Throw a wrench in this, but this item was pulled by a member of the public. So technically we do need to have a staff presentation. There could be a motion after a staff presentation and after public comment to continue the item, but
Okay.
it would procedurally be improper to try to do that right ahead.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. With that, let's go ahead and just go do the staff presentation, then we can come back to deliberation after public comment.
Thank you very much. The agenda report points out that there were several candidates applying for the city's boards and commission. After conducting an interview process through Mayor Williamson, as well as the help of Vice Mayor Barber, Mayor Williamson recommended the following appointments: Neighborhood and Community Improvement Program, NCIP Acohido Oaks, Dean Bobrovsky as alternate for Monterey Vista, Gina Sessions as alternate, Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay, Evans Leonard as representative, and we're basically not proposing Adam Maddox because we learned that he's not living in the required area. So there is a change in the proposal tonight. And then Vice Mayor so there will be no alternate proposed. And then for the appeals hearing board, Vice Mayor Barber recommended Justin Cheng as alternate, and for Parks and Recreation Commission, Amy Reed as a member. The reason why Dr. Barber was tasked to do those appointments are in the agenda report as well, because part of the candidate was running also for office, and it felt more appropriate that the vice mayor would make the appointment and not the mayor who she ran against. That's it.
Thank you, Hans. Bring it back to the council for any questions. No. Okay, seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. So for those in the chamber, I just ask if you can stand up to the left of the podium, or if you prefer to stay seated, I ask that you raise your hand. And then while folks are adjusting, I'm going to check with folks online on Zoom. If you can use the raise hand function, I'll do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 2 folks online. So we have folks lining up. I'll give folks another second. Anybody else that's still seating that wants to speak on this item? So nobody's seating who's wanting to speak on this item. Okay, perfect. So I have Mr. Rowley.
I see 7.
So I'm going to go ahead and bring it to 2 minutes. And we'll go ahead and start in the chamber.
Kurt Tipton. I am specifically talking about the appointment of a naval support activity person to the NICP. The NICP funds should not be used to fund anything on a military base or U.S. property. And yet NCIP is part of it, funding activities in neighborhoods. La Mesa is part of the Naval Academy, the Naval Postgraduate School. I've talked to my neighbors and they all agree that we should not be doing this. We should not be using those funds for anything related to the military activity. If there is something that they want done, they can certainly bring a project in front of NCIP for consideration. Also, that weakens our voting. amount that we have. Each neighborhood will drop down. Are you going to add Presidio also to this? Add another seat to the NCIP? Again, weakening the neighborhoods. It just seems to me to be fundamentally wrong to have the military be part of, or at least influence, the military influence, part of the city government. And the NCIP is part of the city government. And we're putting a military representative, or even if it's a civilian, they have military background, if you will. So we are also influencing the city with a military activity. So I'm just against it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Soule, and I'd like to speak on the importance of retaining the neighborhood character of the neighborhood and community improvement program, while also promoting new involvement of citizens. I appreciate the city policy to solicit online applications for the vacant positions on city boards and commissions. However, per the city charter amendment, the neighborhood improvement program committee is composed of at least one representative from each residential neighborhood. This makes the appointments of the NCIP representatives decidedly different from all the other boards and committees, which come from the city at large. The NCIP manual states that the NCIP representatives are required to determine to what extent projects have support within their neighborhood, which indicates communication with residents within that neighborhood. I hope that for your next cycle of NCIP appointments, you enhance the application for NCIP representatives to include the following questions, which would be posted online for the public to see. Number one, how do you plan to be in contact with the residents in your neighborhood to hear residents' concerns and priorities and to give them feedback from the city NCIP meetings? Number two, how have you been involved in your neighborhood? Number three, are you aware that the majority of the committee's work is condensed between February and June annually, as projects citywide are analyzed, discussed, cost estimated, and voted on? Do you anticipate that this will work with your student, work, and personal schedule during the four-year term? Number four, have you ever attended an NCIP meeting? I think the residents and the council have the same objective, that of an involved citizenry working together to enhance residential neighborhoods. Let's make it happen.
Nancy, would you mind sending me those questions, please? If you can send it electronically, that might be.
Send it to the whole council.
Pat Benza, Monterey Vista neighborhood. Good election day, mayor and council members. The below was pointed out to me and others in the packet for today on page 140. We are so lucky to have citizens in this city who are so good at reading these long packets and find hidden gems. So here's what it says. It's good afternoon, Evans. Thank you for your application in a few months back for Monterey boards and commissions, including the NCIP committee. At the time, we did not have a position for the military neighborhoods of Monterey for which you could be considered. But those NCIP neighborhoods have now been created and the vacancies advertised. Stuck on page 140, like we were just approving people for boards. And it was signed by Clementine. The big questions are, when were those NCIP neighborhoods created? By who? Why now after 40 years of NCIP? Why weren't the NCIP committee members aware of this change in the number of neighborhoods? What is the purpose? These are federal properties that the city cares for under contracts. Are they legally defined as part of the city of Monterey? Do those residents pay taxes to the city? As far as I know, the subject of adding these federal lands to NCIP has never been brought up before now. The strange thing is that adding the federal lands to NCIP has not really been brought up now. Rather, in a very non-transparent manner, people are being asked to be part of NCIP prior to the NCIP committee being informed that federal lands are being considered as residential neighborhoods, or this being considered discussed in public. This is lack of transparency.
Thank you.
Oh, Rosemary Robert, Old Town Neighborhood. Mayor and council, we need clarity on your agenda for adding neighborhoods. Why? For what purpose? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilman Smith, for bringing that issue to everyone's attention with my interview that was not conducted thoroughly. I do see that it says through the process that both Mayor Williamson and Vice Mayor Barber spent many hours reviewing the applications and conducting interviews, giving appropriate attention and time to the process that resulted in the following recommendations. As we discussed, my interview was not conducted. It was conducted by chat box. That's not sufficient for any interview. My concern is that there's problem goes larger than myself, and that there were other people that perhaps were not given a sufficient and appropriate interview. So I do support that you table this and wait. Make sure that everyone was interviewed thoroughly, as has been represented by the council. Thank you.
Tom Raleigh, President of Fisherman's Flats Homeowners and Residents Association. I'd like to support what Tom Rees spoke of earlier. This really needs to be continued. I read the staff report and it was very confusing. I could not figure out, having been a veteran of NIP for 40 years, where naval support activity, where that came from. There was no explanation whatsoever. So whether the city manager came up with this, it was totally inappropriate. Lack of transparency, amen. So something needs to be changed or you're going to get a revolt on your hands. And I'm not kidding.
Good evening. I'm Jean Rash, speaking as an NCIP member for 9 of the last 10 years and as the former vice chair of NCIP from 2021 to 2023. I ask strongly that you today table the appointment of any NCIP rep to a military installation. There was no outreach to NCIP nor to the public for creation of neighborhoods for military installations. This needs thorough discussion. We need transparency on the apparent decision to add military installations to the map of neighborhoods. How was this decision done? Who made it? Why? This was not a grand jury recommendation. How can Monterey neighborhoods include areas owned by the federal government, managed by the federal government, and under the legal jurisdiction of a sovereign other than the city? From the 2012 Policy and Procedures Manual, since updated, I quote, "For NIP purposes, an area must be eligible for NIP funded projects within its boundaries to qualify as a neighborhood," end quote. You can find this quote in the grand jury report of 2019 as well in Appendix D. We need a written legal analysis of how a Monterey neighborhood can include a military installation. No projects can occur where there is lack of access to the public and where land is not owned by or nor under the control of the city of Monterey. There must be a written shared access agreement before NCIP can fund those properties, those projects. And why has there been no collaboration with NCIP? Without communication to NCIP about adding military bases, city leadership is not conforming to the value drivers of transparency, inclusion, community, partnership, and collaboration. Driver number 9. There are much better ideas to resolve the issue of representation, such as adding La Mesa Village to Agua Hida Oaks
than adding inaccessible military installation.
Okay, with that, we'll take it to the public commenters online.
Tom, you're first.
Yes, well, you have my written comments, so I won't belabor those. I think in summary of all these comments, I think this is a fundamentally flawed issue. And instead of continuing it or tabling it, I think it's dead on arrival. I don't see a good way out of this. When I first saw the new policies and procedures manual that was unilaterally created by the city council and staff, and I saw that map, I interpreted places like the Naval Support Activity Monterey to be a placeholder to show that there weren't holes in the city of Monterey map. I never even dreamed that the staff would come forward thinking those were neighborhoods, because when you look at NSAM, it's 4 separate disparate pieces of land. It's not even contiguous. So I think this is just a fundamentally flawed concept, and it should just be, I guess you could call it table it, but don't have it come forward again. And I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to disenfranchise the people, and I want to make a clarification. You and I, any civilian, can actually lease a piece of property up there at La Mesa Village. I investigated this. So I have no desire to disenfranchise those people. It's not a separate neighborhood, though, because as other people have pointed out, it's owned by the federal government. The city, those streets are not city streets. They're not city parks. And therefore, it's not really a neighborhood, as Jean Resch just pointed out. So if we wanted to have it combined with Agujedo Oaks, I would be fine with that, actually, so that those people can be represented. But it shouldn't be a separate neighborhood. Thank you.
And Ms. Beatty? Calling on Nina Beatty?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Nina Beatty. The NCIP committee membership is established by Monterey City Code and is limited to the residential neighborhoods of Monterey under Article 13, Section 2, 1300B. Naval Support Activity Monterey and Presidio of Monterey and their personnel are not part of the NCIP committee. These are federal military bases over which Monterey has no jurisdiction. Recommending appointments to these areas to the committee is improper and a violation of city code based on a plain reading of that code section. The city staff's actions to include them on the NCIP committee webpage and advertise for these positions were also improper. Who initiated and authorized these actions? The city council must comply with city laws and the city code. Reject these appointments as improper and correct the NCIP committee webpage to remove these areas. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council. I think there was a few questions, so maybe I'll just pass it to staff to see if there's an opportunity to answer some of the questions that came.
Yeah, thank you so much. I tried to address the input that we have received.
Sorry, real quick.
Sure.
Alan, are you still with us?
Alan Hopper has internet problems, so he has problems right now to follow us.
Okay. And if he, just for clarity's sake, Chrissy, since he's not here.
I don't know, is he able to hear or is he just completely off?
Yeah, he's not on the meeting.
So he probably would be prohibited from voting on this item.
Okay.
Unless he watches it on TV.
If he's able to hear.
Well, when he comes back,
Yeah.
we'll clarify with him.
Right.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Hans.
So there were a lot of statements made, and I tried to hopefully address them in the right way. The NCIP manual was updated on 9/7/2021. with Gene Rash was there at that time, and that includes a neighborhood map. And in that neighborhood map that was approved by the City of Council, it shows the military areas as neighborhoods. So they are entitled to have representation on the NCIP committee. And every single one of you of the NCIP was notified in 9/7/21 when the manual was approved, and we worked hard on getting it approved, that was part of the NCIP manual. We have traditionally always challenges in entering new neighborhoods. Kurt, you might recall when downtown wanted to be a neighborhood, and there was considerable pushback from the NCIP that this was not really a neighborhood. So pushing back on neighborhoods is not really something new for us. I point out that there was transparency because we approved this on 9/7/21, and you know how much we discussed the manual, Tom Rowley. So go back into section 5 of the manual, and you see the map and you see the neighborhood identified there. Neighborhoods are defined by the NCIP, not by a dictionary, and the NCIP clearly defines them as a neighborhood. The other part is those applications were posted in June for Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay. And the emails were opened by Kurt, by Gene, by Dennis Duke in June. You saw that we were advertising for Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay. So I just want to say the allegation of transparency hits hard. If you looked at the email and you saw what we were doing, and if you know the NCIP manual, you know that we are doing just like that. We have done projects on federal property with NCIP money for many, many years. NCIP funded the rehabilitation of Navy dunes. NCIP funded the Child Development Care Center, the CDC that we had. NCIP funded Soldiers Field. As a matter of fact, the NCIP manual provides the guidance how you are funding projects on federal installations or on properties that are not owned by the City of Monterey, i.e. MPUSD, MPC. We have done this for years. There's nothing new. What is new, I believe, is that someone feels this is a new thing and we have to discuss it here, even though we have done it for years, for decades. So again, yes, we can do this. And yes, the NCIP manual addresses out of jurisdiction, how to do that process. You need an agreement before you start the NCIP project that the feds, for instance, would accept the project. And then we need a memorandum of understanding how this project is being used. So there have to be a few extra steps, but we have done that quite a few times. And let me end on another note. Every single one of the folks that are serving our country and our nation deserve a right to be represented by this city government. And the NCIP is part of that.
Thank you, Hans. Bring it back to the council for motion and deliberation.
So I'm still confused on the interview and I know and I trust Dr. Barber, and she's saying that she tried, but I'm just struck by, an interview, it seems like should be on Zoom or in person or telephonically, but to do an interview that's, restrained and confined to chat seems like in today's world, seems like it's just a little bit short. And so that's my comment in terms of that one interview. I want to also say that, and I think the city managers addressed it, that we have had people who have not been selected who disagreed with the process. Either they weren't selected for what they thought they should have been, either they didn't feel like they had an adequate interview, they thought they should have been interviewed with the whole council. They, weren't able to do the interview in person, so it was a phone interview. So there's been lots of different circumstances with applicants through the years where they disagreed with the opinion. So it's not It's not an unusual and it's not an aberration, because we happen to have one candidate who had a technical problem. So that's that one-off that is a technical problem. The purpose I had in trying to postpone this was I just felt like we've got a lot of holes in this that are not necessarily complete yet. I think they've sort of been highlighted by some of the statements from the public. The city manager gave us a brief in terms of the military component of this selection. I do have one question of staff, if I might. Is this the first representative in an NCIP's capacity that is representing the Naval Support Activity Monterey? Have we had a representative there before?
It's the first one.
This is the first one. So I guess the question then is, since we approved it in 2021, why haven't we ever advertised that to fulfill that position that the city council authorized the list and included the naval support community in 2021? So the question is, why haven't we ever advertised it before now?
Yeah, so we realized that when we saw an application coming in from Mr. Leonard, Leonard, that there we had not appointed someone for Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay. So when he applied for it, we realized, oops, we had to we never appointed someone for Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay. So that was basically the reason for going back to the manual and finding out that the city council shall appoint at least one resident from each residential neighborhood to the NCIP. And so since the person lives on the Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay, we felt it was appropriate to appoint that person to a Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay. We still don't have someone from the city of Monterey yet.
Okay.
So it's at the end of the day, if no one applies or is willing to run for Skyline Forest also, you may not have a representative on Skyline Forest if you don't find someone or have not appointed someone.
Understood. If there's no other comment, I'll make a motion.
Well, I think there's plenty of comments.
Okay, I'll stop talking.
But I think my style has been, since being mayor, there's no control over somebody making a motion. You have the mic now, so if you want to try to make a motion, feel free to.
I'll hold it. I want to hear from the council members.
All right. Dr. Barber.
Yes, so personally, I feel like there's no reason to hold anything, especially after learning that in 2021, it was already approved for this particular area being part of NCIP. Secondly, I won't belabor it, but as far as technical interviews, I've had interviews before, and in this day and age, as you say, chat is something that would be easily done. I've done it many times, and with jobs, with interviews, or we've had technical issues, what I've already said before. All questions were the same. Everybody had the same opportunity. Nothing would have been changed or different because the same questions were asked and had opportunity to be answered. And there were no complaints from Monique or anyone else about anything. And if that was the case, that would have been brought to the attention of the city clerk, and then we would have taken care of it. I have no problem that having to redo an interview. That wouldn't have been a problem if that was an issue. It never was brought up as an issue until now. So I don't see it that being an issue now, knowing that it's a technical difficulty that was out of my control that I asked, and we were able to keep going in the particular meeting. And they were asked the same questions and had the same opportunity like anybody else to answer the question. So I don't see a problem with it.
Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you. So when I first saw the report, I did have a few questions because military representatives to me is something new as well. But I think my questions were answered with our city manager's report, and it makes sense. I mean, we do need to acknowledge and really emphasize that we do have a significant military presence in our city and in our region. Just today, I was showing some folks from out of town, just taking them driving around, and I was pointing out several times, that's a military installation, that's a military installation. So that to me makes me think also, right, that what we're doing is right in terms of providing representation or offering the space to that population to be represented. So I'll be supporting this item tonight.
Councilmember Hoffa, I think you missed part of the deliberations.
So, yeah, so I'm planning to abstain because I couldn't hear it all. But I did want to say that I think that if the problem with the interview was on our side, the technical side, then I definitely think we should have rescheduled it. I did hear some of the city manager's explanation, but I'm going to be abstaining because I didn't hear all of the discussion.
Okay. So I have a few additional questions, and some of the public comment that we received online alluded to this coming from a proposal for me, and I just want to help set the record straight that this didn't come from the mayor. Staff had articulated, and Hans just spoke to how the applicant applied to be a member of the NCIP. The city clerk's office followed up and then advertised it and opened it up. And I would echo Hans's point that nothing was done from my perspective behind closed doors. It was advertised, and in as much as we talked about this last time, that there was concern around how the interview process was conducted. I clearly articulated, and it's to many of you in the room that are involved with neighborhood associations and NCIP, that you can sign up online to get notified when vacancies come up. So that way, if you wanted to make a recommendation, you could do so. So it should have been no surprise that it was advertised. Whether we move forward with it or not, I think leads to my first question. Hans, I'm wondering if you could describe the process a little bit more. You described there was issues when the downtown neighborhood association wanted to be formed. Could you describe the history of that a little bit more, and how did the city go about looping in the downtown neighborhood association?
I can ask Chrissy to remember a few more details, which she probably has, but I remember that the conversation was very much when Mr. Tipton was arguing for a downtown neighborhood, that this is a commercial area and it wouldn't be deserving, it's not really residential, and it wouldn't be deserving of TOT funds for NCIP. And I think at that time, the council at that time said, no, not really. And it has to be a neighborhood because people live in that area as well. And my point to Mr. Tipton was just to remind him of it's always difficult to get neighborhoods kind of into the club of neighborhoods. And with that, I give it to Chrissy.
Yes, that's all accurate. It even predates Mr. Tipton. So there were individuals that lived downtown that would express an interest in serving on the NCIP, and they were flat out denied the opportunity to even apply because they weren't a part of a neighborhood. And it took, I want to say I worked on this for about 10 years to get the NCIP manual updated to include residential neighborhoods such as in the downtown. So as we've grown into a mixed use residential commercial communities, it was disenfranchising to those people to not have a representative. And I'll just, and so finally we got the manual changed, but that was a whole long hurdle. And subsequently, Mr. Tipton came along and anyway, we got that straightened out. And during that process, I know I made very clear to the city council and to staff that there should be no person who lives in the city that doesn't have the right to representation. And so when you tell certain people that live in areas that they're not allowed to have a representative, that doesn't really work in our democracy. And I'll also remind everyone that when we converted to districting, all of the residents on the military areas were counted and considered in where to draw the boundaries. And so It's a very important part of our community. How you wish to draw the neighborhood lines is up to the city council. It may be time, maybe the council is going to say, you know, we want to just have representatives mirror, this is not going to be popular, mirror the electoral districts. So have 4 districts in the city that match the city council voting districts. Anyway, so that's a policy decision for the council. From a legal perspective, everyone needs to have a representative. How that's assembled and compiled is up to the policymakers.
And so what if a new group wanted to be formed? Like, can we just try to describe that process? I'm assuming the council,
So-
an updated map would be drawn and that would be presented to the council?
So when we brought the revised map to the city council in 2021, we made sure every part of the city was encompassed on that map. So there was no gaps or holes like there had been in prior maps. Before there was just maps where there was nobody with a representative. So we fixed that. The council fixed that in 2021. That's why there's Ryan Ranch is a neighborhood, even though people don't live there yet. But when people do live there, they have the right to have a representative as well. So,
And then just to throw out another question on this vein, let's say that the southern part of, or the lower part of Old Town, at the bottom of the hill, wanted to create its own seat. Is that something that is a possibility? I'm just trying to fully understand how this process works.
It is whatever the council wants.
So if a group, if a neighbor, if a group of folks in the neighborhood wanted to form their own seat, the council could consider that and.
Right.
the council can determine where the neighborhood boundaries are located.
Okay.
And how many there are.
Okay, all right. You answered that question. I think there was a question in regards to later on adding the Presidio. And you may have answered this earlier, but there's a lot of information here. So I just wanted to clarify, the NSAM seat is representing which parts of the city?
Whatever's in map, in the section 5 of the map.
Yeah, I can describe it as La Mesa Village, the Naval Postgraduate School campus, where people actually live on campus, a few, and then the annex, NSAM annex.
Okay.
They're non-contiguous, but they're all represented through US Navy.
And then the Presidio isn't on the map.
Presidio is on the map as a neighborhood as well.
Somebody wanted to, so we should technically be advertising the Presidio?
We did in June.
Okay.
No one applied.
And nobody applied. Okay. Okay, I think that's my questions. Thank you for that. I appreciate the background. It was helpful to understand how we got here. One point that I'll say before I share my final thought on this is, I think it is a little bit unfair to say, I don't think a solution is to say, we're going to loop in folks that are living in the La Mesa Village to add them to Aguajita Oaks neighborhood, because at what point is anybody that would potentially want to be on the NCIP committee in La Mesa going to actually be able to serve on it? Can you imagine the pushback from folks that live in Aguajita Oaks that want to have that representation, because that's probably where the majority of the projects will be from that district? I just can see that creating some conflict. I don't know what the solution is, but I stand by the point that I shared earlier. And as much as I appreciate there being interest in wanting to move forward with this, because we want to give more time, I want to be able to find a common ground so we can find a space of moving forward. I will ask the council to consider continuing the La Mesa seats to the November 19th meeting. And so that's going to be my motion is going to be to continue that appointment, but to approve the rest of the recommendations.
Mayor, clarification.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
So when you're referring to La Mesa, you want to continue and talk about.
Neighborhood, I'm sorry, the NSAM seat.
So you want to continue the naval support activity at Monterey
That's correct.
and act on everything else tonight.
That's correct.
Okay. Alternative motion.
Okay.
My motion would be that we act on tonight, Aguajito Oaks, Monterey Vista, the appeals hearing, Parks and Rec, and that we reschedule an interview on the technical problem of, I think, a chat interview is insufficient. And that person should be interviewed again, because I noticed that that person also applied for several different positions. And that would be my motion.
So can you clarify? So we're moving forward on everything but what? In your motion?
Very similar to yours. I'm just adding that a re-interview be instituted for Ms. Caldy.
Okay.
That we act on Aguajito Oaks, Monterey Vista, appeals hearing, and Parks and Rec. Delay the naval support activity, which was included in your motion. And I'm adding that we make sure we do an appropriate interview that's either in person or on a Zoom that's functioning.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? All right. So that motion dies. Staff has a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I believe Ms. Caldy applied for the appeals board and the Parks and Rec.
Correct. Well, it doesn't matter at this point because the motion's dead.
Got it. Okay, good.
I was going to go there. I was going to go there if.
Well, no, I read, no, I understand. I read her application. So I'm aware of what she applied for.
So I do want to make a comment in regards to that. It seems like Dr. Barber in the interview clarified the methodology and how to move forward. And in as much as if I were the applicant, I would have said, please, let's pause the interview and let's maybe try to reschedule if we can't work it out. I would have actively have done that. But because the interview continued, she had, it sounds like the same opportunity that everybody else did. And to hear that she only contacted you, it just, I'm not finding that as a compelling argument to reschedule. Dr. Barber feels good about her recommendation and I want to be able to support her in that. So I think we stand back at the motion on the table. Is there any other comments from the council?
Just a question,
please.
On your first motion, because there was no second. So mine is dead. So just had a question on, were there other interviews that were done either by the mayor or Dr. Barber that were not on Zoom or in live interview? Were others by chat or text?
So, Mayor.
Please, go ahead.
So all of them were done by Zoom, including Monique's. She could still see me. We were still doing that. It was just through chat because the audio wasn't working. So I just want to clarify that. All of them were done by Zoom. All of them,
Teams.
Teams, I'm sorry. I'm in the Zoom state of mind because that's what I do. When I do.
Either is acceptable.
Yeah. So so all were done by virtual Teams. Nothing was different except for the audio wasn't working. So we used the chat. Just for clarification.
Okay. Any other discussion?
And you did some. So my question was.
Yeah, all of mine.
Zooms or chats?
It was a combination. Sometimes the technology doesn't work. So I'll jump on a phone call or there have been some where it was partially in chat because we're having issues. But for the most part, I've been able to interview my folks via Teams.
Okay, just a comment before we take a motion or before we take a vote. I've done many of those interviews. Prior, we've had multiple different ways where it's been a subcommittee by the mayor, previous mayors. It's been a subcommittee of the council. I sat in this room with Timothy Barrett. We probably interviewed 20 people over the course of 2 weeks in person. I'm just an advocate for in person, and I think Zoom is fine or Teams is fine. But I just think we lose a lot if we're doing text or phone interviews without having a visual connection to a person. So I just, as we move forward, I just think that the operating way that we should be doing this is in person, on Zoom, some technical where we get an actual physical connection, hearing audio and being able to see the person in an interview. Because I think that's where we really make a connection. And I think we have an obligation to do that to the applicants or with them, with the applicant, because they take a lot of time and effort. And so I think we should elevate this to an in-person interview whenever possible.
Yeah, and maybe we can bring this back up in the governance discussion at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
With the new council. All righty. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
No.
and Mayor Williamson.
Yes. And then you have, he's.
Councilmember Hoffa is abstaining. Yes.
Yep, perfect. Okay. Public appearance 17, consider employee Richard Castellan's request for military leave, additional supplemental salary beyond 330 days. I'm going to pass it to Hans. I'm just hoping that we can make like the shortest presentation possible. I want to give it justice, but I also want to be mindful of the time we have left.
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We have an employee, Richard Castellan, who is on military leave. And per our city code, we supplement pay. And so they have 180 days, above 180 days, city manager approves, which he has done in this case. And the employee is requesting to go above what the city manager has approved, which per our code requires city council approval. He is requesting additional time from October 29th to January 8th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. You did it. Council, are there any questions?
Just one.
Okay.
So his request is to January. Is that meaning that his intention is that he'll complete his military assignment and be returning to work?
That's the intention. His orders are till the 7th of January.
Okay. And his orders are, is he overseas or is he stateside?
I think he's stateside.
He works at the Pentagon as in the personal protection area.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Brett. Open up for public comment. Anybody in the chamber? Do we have anybody online? We'll do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have nobody online. We'll bring it back to the council for a motion deliberation.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Any other discussion?
Well,
I'm sorry,
I need
the
to say what
motion
the
is-
motion is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm assuming you were approving staff recommendation.
Yes, but I want it to come out of my words so she can report it. My motion is to accept the staff's recommendation.
I'll second. Any other discussion? Brett, please go ahead.
Recommendation is to consider and make the decision.
Okay. So I will amend my motion and then I seek a second that we accept the request by this employee to extend military leave and continue compensation until January 7th, 8th. Okay, January 8th of 2025.
A second. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote,
I
please.
knew it was going to be complicated.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Mayor Williamson.
Yes, thank you for that. And appreciate Richard's service to not only our city, but our country. Moving on to item number 19, receive presentation by Monterey Peninsula Water Management District on the 2024-2025 water allocation process and authorize a letter supporting the proposed MPWMD water allocation for the city of Monterey. And I'll pass it to Hans for their staff introduction.
Dave Stoll, take it away.
My presentation's coming up. It'll be just one moment. I start. Thank you, council. This afternoon, we're asking you to receive a presentation from the Water District on a proposed water allocation process
for a new water supply that's coming online, and to authorize a letter supporting the proposed allocation to the city of Monterey. And as I mentioned, the main purpose is for the city council to authorize a letter to the water district supporting its proposed methodology to distribute water to various government agencies. So why are we here? I think it's important to remind you about the value drivers of our city council as well as the general plan. The city council has long directed staff that one of their values is to secure a water source and to champion regional and local efforts to secure adequate, affordable, and sustainable water sources for the city. And really, access to water is a gatekeeper, if you will, for our city goals to build affordable housing as well as our economic vitality goals. The city council just recently adopted a housing element. Water supply is identified as the primary constraint to the city meeting its housing objectives. And I think it's very important to emphasize that the city does not currently have access to sufficient water to support development of our regional housing needs allocation. Staff is going to be recommending that you support a letter. It basically allocates 141 acre feet to the city of Monterey through this process. I do want to share with you two cautionary notes before Mr. Stolt presents to you. The growth projections for the city are based on the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments projections. Staff continues to believe that we have significant challenges and inconsistencies and technical concerns with those numbers. And it predominantly comes down to employment projections. They used a confidential data source that they can't share with the local jurisdictions. So we can't fact check their employment numbers. We voiced this concern. We are going to continue to work to resolve this issue with AMBAG in the future, but the growth projections for employment we think are substantially are inaccurate. Number two is even with the additional water supply being provided through the Pure Monterey expansion project, it's important to note that the cease and desist order will remain outstanding until the State Water Resources Control Board lifts the order. And as you know, why this is important is we need the ability to set new water meters. So it's beyond just allocating water to a project with an existing meter, but we actually can develop on vacant lots of record. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Stolt, the executive director, so he can share with you more of the technical background of the water allocation process.
Thank you, Kim. Do you want me to advance? Aye. Thank you for having me. We will get you out on time. I want to thank Mr. Raleigh for introducing our district. I do want to caution your interpretation of his remarks. We have a very trustworthy and hardworking board representing you on our water issues. And he is correct, however, that we had two sources of revenue. One that was given back to us about 6 fiscal years ago by the Public Utilities Commission, which was directed primarily to environmental mitigation for withdrawals from the river and conservation, and then some to water supply. And then we had a water supply charge, and that brought us the design and construction of Pure Water Monterey and now the Pure Water Monterey expansion, which is why we're here tonight. So you've received some goods for all of those, but yes, a judge interpreted language differently than we had. So with that, we want to talk about the allocation process. And what the allocation process is identifying a fixed amount of water that each jurisdiction can use for their purposes to grow, to build housing and create jobs. In the 90s, we actually looked at the existing supplies and we divvied them up and we told each jurisdiction, here's your share. But what we noticed was with increasing environmental degradation, that the amount of water that could be extracted was probably in decline. And it did ultimately result in an order in 1995, which limited the amount of water that could be coming out of the Carmel River and then in the early 2000s from the Seaside Basin. So we shifted in 1993 to an allocation process where when a new supply comes along, we identify what portion of that new supply can be allocated to the cities for their use. And why do we do it? Well, just what I mentioned, scarcity of supplies, Order 9510, and the cease and desist order. And we do like tracking new demand for water. It gives us a very front-looking view of what's happening and where water is being used in the system. So an allocation is like a bank account. We don't give you actual water. You don't control water. We put a credit in your account of a certain amount of water. And then as you sign water release forms to projects, that's a debit. And that reduces the amount of water you have to work with. And eventually you hit a point where you're looking towards a zero bank balance and you come to us and it's like my kids asking for an allowance. Hey, Dad, can we have some more? So we're going to be talking to each jurisdiction and seeing how your progress is going at housing starts, commercial starts. And then we will assess it when one jurisdiction comes to us and says, we need more water. We'll bring everybody back into the room and have another water allocation process that involves every jurisdiction. So not just completely first come, first serve, but there will be rewards for those who follow through on their planning. And how does this affect the permit cycle? So a developer comes, wants to build a project. He counts how much water is needed. He obtains that release form from your jurisdiction. We review the plans, issue a water permit. It comes back to you. He receives his building permit and then moves forward on construction. So we work together in a team, each of the cities, the unincorporated county. And why is this important today? Well, as I mentioned, we are bringing online in approximately 11 months, the Pure Water Monterey expansion, a joint project owned and operated by Monterey One Water, pre-construction funding about 75 cents on the dollar from us. We buy the water from Monterey One Water, and then we resell what is not needed for reserves to California American Water for delivery to customers. So we have this chunk of new water, 2,250 acre feet. It's football season. An acre foot is a foot of water on a football field, basically, of new water. So we're in this process. I'm coming to all of the city councils here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, with possibly the exception of Carmel. Wants to wait till after the first of the year, and then also the board of supervisors, the board of the airport district. And as Kim Cole pointed out, it will not solve everything. The paramount issue for us is after we get this allocation done is to start the work to try to lift the cease and desist order from the state water board. That's a precursor to lifting the moratorium on setting of new meters. So that will be our focus. I'll be coming to you in a separate effort to get your support to work with us on that process. And the state board expects to see us right after the first of the year. So it starts with how much water is there to allocate. I mentioned that 2,250 of new supply from the expansion, but really it's a sum of all your available water supply compared to where you stand today and what you need in the future. So what this chart shows you is just all of the named available water supplies, what they're worth in terms of annual yield. I can tell you that we differ from California American on what we value the Pure Water Monterey expansion as in a drought year. They've thrown in some testimony saying, well, it could be worth 0 or it could be worth 1,100, but certainly not 2,250 acre feet. Similarly, we have a disagreement over aquifer storage and recovery. We are showing you what we believe are battle-tested numbers based on the data. There's 59 years worth of hydrogeologic data supporting the ASR number. And then there is a series of let's just call it false assumptions in a technical memorandum that California American relied on for the pure water expansion numbers. I tend to trust the owner and operator of the project to know more than someone who's not directly involved in the project. And so those numbers come from Monterey One Water. How much do we need to meet current demand? Well, we looked at demand numbers for the last 25 years. We've seen a trend in the last 10 where demand in this community on the Monterey Peninsula has kind of stabilized between 9,000 and 10,000 acre feet. Now, I can tell you last year, the water year ends September 30th. Last year was the first year since 1957 that total demand on the Monterey Peninsula went under 9,000 acre feet per year. So we're using as much as we did in 1957. This number, the 9,557, is a 5-year average. So you start with, well, where are we today? How much do we need? And then we'll grow from there. So I would say, look at the bottom of this chart first. I already identified the 12,116 acre feet of available supply. We just saw the 9,557 of 5-year average of demand. So that tells us that there's just another 2,600 acre feet available that could possibly be allocated. But there's factors of safety involved. We don't want to give it all away and overreach and then discover that maybe we wanted to apply some of that to the in lieu recharge or recharging of the seaside groundwater basin, or apply some of it to drought years or building up reserves here at the front end of a future that will certainly produce surpluses. So we said we'll hold back 1,000 acre feet for now, and we will have 1,559 acre feet that we could allocate. So we began to look at what the needs of the cities and the county are. And we said that will help define what will be needed in the future. How fast are we going to grow? Now, I can tell you, your staff came in for 2 hours on a grueling day, both your city manager and your planning director. We're going to get through all this in about 12 minutes, 15 minutes. So, but they understand our level of detail, that there's method to our madness, that there's some rigor involved. So the starting point, how much do I use today? Well, we kind of established that. That's a 9557 number. So then we focus in on how fast are we going to grow? And this is very difficult to read, but the tools to answer those questions, as Kim Cole pointed out, we tend to use the AMBAG regional growth forecast as a indicator of the growth in population, which drives residential water use, and the growth rate in jobs, which drives the non-residential water use. Their growth forecast is a 25-year forecast, then dovetails into the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, a 25-year study, the Sustainable Communities, SCS, I can't remember what the second S stands for, but it's an AMBAG product also that relies on the regional growth forecast. So we look to that for people, because people use water. That's residential growth and jobs. And then we interviewed and surveyed the service branches. So Coast Guard here in Monterey, Naval Support Monterey, and Presidio in the airport. So we got their numbers separately going forward. This is water demand for the last 20 years. You can see that decline and the leveling that I mentioned earlier. And we know how much each jurisdiction uses, and we know how much is by residential and non-residential. And from here, you can see the residential use among all of the jurisdictions is about 66%, non-residential use about a third. And you can see certain things that pop out, like you don't see much commercial for Delray Oaks, but you can actually see them on the pie chart for residential. Well, it's a residential community. And you see a little bit of the opposite for Sand City. You can see their slice of the pie on the non-residential use, and very little on the residential side. But we know how much each city uses. So we go to the next question: how fast will we be growing? We go to the AMBAG regional growth forecast, and we apply the population growth rate on residential and the commercial growth rate on non-residential. And there you can see the jurisdictions, current demand from that 5-year average, your residential growth rate from AMBAG, your non-residential growth rate from AMBAG. And then we have a column called residential served by others. So for some of your sister cities and your original housing element, there would be housing located in the old Fort Ord. Well, that will be served by Marina Coast Water District. So we need to take that out of our forecast because it's not a service area need. When the city council adopted the revised housing element in July, all of the buffer housing, the housing over and above the RENA goal was assigned to the old Fort Ord. So we are now saying that you have 0 served by others because we're only looking at your 3,654 units of RENA target. I mentioned the linkages between AMBAG's documents. So they do the regional growth forecast on a 4-year cycle. They do the metropolitan transportation plan on a 4-year cycle. And they do the RENA allocation on an 8-year cycle. And by law, all of those have to be on the same 4-year pattern. AMBAG will tell you that they're all self-referencing, and you can read the metropolitan transportation plan. The first appendix is the growth forecast. And in the plan, it says it includes the 6th cycle of RENA. And you would say, voila, they're all self-referencing and supporting each other. And it turns out not to be the case. AMBAG has a population forecast, which we've talked about. We tend to say people use water, empty houses don't use water. So I would look normally to people growth, population growth. But the 6th cycle allocation of housing units was so different than what their population forecast stated that we had to kind of grapple with this as resource planners. Which do we plan for? In Carmel, do we plan for, 35 new people or 349 new housing units? Obviously, if you get the housing units, you'll have more than 35 new people. Similar problem here for Monterey. Population was only about half of what the housing unit growth was. And then opposite problem for places like Sand City. So this one threw us for a loop, and we went kind of to high level mathematics, and we said, well, all right, let's assume houses can use water. Let's allocate water based on fixtures in a mixture of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom multifamily and single family homes that fit the categories of very low income, moderate, and above moderate. And we said, if these houses got built, here's what water they would use. Let's take that water. And this is what we found, that for meeting population growth, Monterey would need 253 acre feet. But to meet housing growth, you would need 422 acre feet. So the higher math that we use is add those two together and divide by 2. And so we did that for all the different jurisdictions. On the residential setting. On the non-residential water side, we continue to use the same growth rate from the AMBAG growth forecast. And I'm frozen.
Can you manually forward the slide?
Yeah. There you go. So it leads us to our next point, which is how much will we need in the future? That's where you take that amount of what we use today by each jurisdiction and their individualized growth rates, and you just project it out for the 25-year period. And this is what are we both touching? All right, you go ahead. Excellent. And so here you look at Monterey, and we said, okay, your 25-year need is 422 acre feet. Let's allocate a third of it. The proposed allocation is 141 acre feet. If you use it quickly, you'll be the first ones to come back to us and say, we would like more, and then we will consider that. You have an existing allocation that's very small, but we're going to honor those existing allocations. And so you would be looking at a total initial allocation of 143.9 and change acre feet, which would give you enough to get started. Now, by comparison, if you think about the Monterey, I can't remember what the title of the project is, but the last remaining Cannery Row site next to
Ocean View Plaza.
yeah, Ocean View Plaza. Thank you. That's a roughly 23 acre foot plan. Well, so you look at your 143 and you say, wow, we could be going through it very quickly. But I can assure you that the pace at which we build prior to the issuance of the cease and desist order across the entire peninsula was about 16 acre feet per year. The current growth rates are indicating about 32 to 33 acre feet per year. So seldom will you see the big projects that come in and gobble up all of your water. But it may happen, and that's when you would say, hey, we're doing a good job. We just got 300 housing units done. So we're sensitive to that, but we really do want to see jurisdictions that are committed to housing creation and job growth to actually make progress before we just give the water away. Because, you know, some jurisdictions are hoarders. And that carries me to where I am. So that's our proposal for Monterey. I think I'll leave it up so you can see kind of where you stand next to others. I can assure you that Delray Oaks will change a little bit because about 90% of their housing element was geared towards the former Fort Ord. I think they've kind of loosened up their view a little bit and identified some additional lots and locations inside their existing our boundary, put it that way. And then the airport and the defense service branches were promoting a 50% allocation. And as you know, the airport's got its new terminal project and so forth. So we've reviewed those plans through the survey effort that we did. And with that, certainly open to questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask the council, if you have questions, let's limit it to one. And we have to go out to public comment still, and it's getting past the time that
No questions.
okay. Anybody else? All right, I see no questions. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open it up for public comment and we'll bring it back to the council for any last minute comments. Anybody in the public, in the chamber wish to speak on this item?
Good move.
I have Tom. Anybody else? I'll check online in the meantime, do a countdown for folks to use the raise hand function via Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have one person online. I'm going to leave it to 2 minutes.
Good evening again. Tom Raleigh. I'm as vice president of the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. I've been following water issues for over 30 years, attending all the meetings long before Mr. Stolt arrived. We've been in a water constricted situation for a long time. We're coming out, his data that he gives is so premature. And basically his recommendation to give you how much, yeah, you'll take it, but it's premature. We are still coming out. Hospitality has still not totally revived. I think the earliest, they're 70% projections for next year. But things like aquifer storage and recovery, they've never made that what he shows on his graph. There's other things I could criticize, but there's not enough time to get into it. But anyway, what he's proposing today, quite frankly, is premature. We need to come out and get beyond the COVID drawdown. And we need to also the AMBAG figures, which Kim Cole mentions part of their study. She cannot get the basis for it. But the thing is, AMBAG figures is 796,000 for the Tri-County area for 2026. And I believe if we get out of the water situation, you're going to see an increase, a great increase. On Garden Road, you have 4 major complexes, the 69 units that Mr. Brad Slamma is due to come on next year. He delayed it from this year. And there's two other projects that are vacant lots now, where Trident Center was and where the gym was. So you've got some major, major things that are going to eat this up. And he mentions 26 acre feet. So there's major developments that are not taken into account. So I'm saying this thing is premature. You can go ahead and submit it, but it means nothing at this point. So thank you.
And we'll hear from Ms. Beatty. Go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Nina Beatty. On the water allocation, the military has already asserted special privileges that it plans to put forth to take water. Critical element that's not mentioned tonight is quality of water. This community has many health problems, and we should be able to have safe water and quality water through new and old meters. But when I talked to CalAm last year about water testing, I couldn't get answers. What do you test for? What's your checklist? They sent me to a state webpage on general data. And so I said, who tests your water? And I got no answers. Fort Ord is a Superfund site. It's heavily contaminated with many unique toxins. The Fort Ord Community Action Group researched and covered hundreds and hundreds of known and likely chemicals and toxic compounds used there, especially at Site 39, the most contaminated area, which overlies the seaside groundwater basin, where most of our drinking water is stored and now mixed with recycled sewage and industrial wastewater. Only 10 substances were tested for at Site 39 and only sampled at one site on the very edge of the property. We don't know what's in our water because officials were in too big of a hurry to redevelop and make money for developers. CalAm's desal plant ignores Fukushima's radioactive water that's been flowing into the bay for 13 years and now augmented by dumping. Detectable cesium, for example, high levels of tritium is dumped by Japan, becoming radioactive water which cannot be filtered out. You've got brackish water from the Salinas Valley. It's polluted with industrial ag chemicals, including DDT residues and Fort Ord's plume. So we have a big water problem. The fortunate ones in Pebble Beach, Jacks Peak, Alta Mesa, other areas have well water from aquifers not connected to these polluted sources. But what good is an allocation if it doesn't get us healthy water for the very expensive houses in Monterey and for the rest of us? Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council for last minute comments on the presentation.
Quickly comment. I just want to deflect from AMBAG, not AMBAG's fault. The state requires certain constrained data and formulations, and my vote on AMBAG at the time when we went through the RENA calculations for the sixth cycle was a protest vote of no because of the data that was forced on us by the state. So Kim addressed it. We're stuck with a system that's forced by the Housing Community Development state of California, and that's why we arrive at a 3654 number, which is completely out of line for Monterey's need. It was the jobs, the data was faulty. We still need housing, not declining that at all, but that number is a ridiculously false number. It's the only comment I have.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, Dave, sorry that you had to sit through all of that to get to your presentation. We appreciate you watching the sausage making of City of Monterey politics. But it was very informative presentation. My hope is that maybe you can come back in the spring and we can have a little bit more of an engaged conversation where we're not distracted by, I don't know, an election. But we appreciate it. There's a lot that I want to say, but I'm going to defer it for now. I'm hopeful that we can still find a way of having a conversation around having the CDO lifted temporarily. I kind of briefly talked to you about that. Because at the end of the day, we need to get housing developed, and if the State Water Resources Control Board isn't willing to play ball with us, even though, despite the fact that we might make an argument that we have enough water, if they're not willing to get it lifted, we're not going to get any housing developed. So we can talk more, but appreciate you. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is council comments. Anybody?
Yeah, I have one comment. Congratulations on those that are running statewide, citywide, and just best of luck to everyone. And recognize that the sun will come out tomorrow. Elections are contentious. But remember,
I apologize.
Oh,
You're
we have
supposed to
something
author-
else?
No, I apologize. Let's go back. Kim walking made me realize that I forgot something. We do have to authorize the letter of supporting the proposal. So that there's an action item for us there.
Okay.
Is there a motion on that item? Is
So moved.
there a second? All right. Any other discussion?
And I'm sorry, I just turned my computer off and it's on the last presentation we had.
That's correct.
So could you highlight what the recommendation for me is? Because my computer is off.
Authorize a letter supporting the proposed MPWMD water allocation for the city of Monterey.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Roll call vote, please.
Sound good.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Mayor Williamson.
Yes. Councilmember Smith, I apologize for interrupting you there.
That's okay. I was just going to remind everyone, respect, dignity goes a long way, irrespective of however, who voted, how they voted. Tomorrow, we live in the community together. The sun will come out tomorrow. Hold your head high and put the election behind you and live your life quality in your neighborhoods and care for others. So congratulations to those that ran and congratulations on the community that voted. So live with the outcome, but treat each other with respect and let's get along as a community and as a nation without strife over elections in the past. It's in the rearview mirror as of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay. If you haven't voted, you still have,
City manager.
no, I'm doing my comments.
Oh, sorry.
I know, it's okay.
He's raising his hand.
It's okay. I got you, Hans. I'm not gonna forget about you. You have what?
2 hours,
An hour and
3 minutes.
51 minutes. Thank you. So please, if you haven't had the opportunity to vote yet, please take the opportunity to do that. Polls are still open here in California. And with that, oh, and I echo Councilmember Smith's comments. Congrats to everybody on the election process and practicing the democratic process. And I'll pass it to Hans for the city manager report.
Yeah, and I wanted to also echo that the polls are open till 8 p.m. tonight, and also the first election results for Monterey County will be posted online shortly after 8 p.m. today. So all those who are in local races, go on Monterey County elections and don't forget to refresh or empty out your history because those websites sometimes are a little clumsy. So after 8 p.m. tonight, the election results for Monterey County initial will be posted.
Appreciate you. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.